Helio. I'm here with Stephanie Breedlove, the author of All In, which just came out in February. And we're here to discuss a lot of things, entrepreneurship, women entrepreneurs, and everything that goes with it. So, thanks for coming.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here.
And let's just jump right in. So you've been an entrepreneur for 20 years, which seems like a very impressive length of time in a difficult career. But you've been passionate and very successful. So how about a little background on your story and how you ended up here?
Oh, I'd be happy to. And you hit on a word that I think is key to every entrepreneur, and that word is passion. And I think it defines my leap and then my journey. So a little bit of background. I came out of graduate school and went to work in corporate America for Anderson Consulting, which today is Accenture, in the late 1980s. So I'm dating myself a little bit. And I had a great career. I really enjoyed it. I loved it. I felt like I was doing good things, kind of breaking ground as a woman in corporate America. I had two sons while I was with Accenture, 16 months apart. Right. And although I really was committed to a dual income career, I wasn't sure staying in corporate America was for me. And the reason I shared that I had two sons is that in the process of returning to work, my husband and I hired a nanny.
Okay.
And in 1991, we decided we wanted to pay her legally, benefits, kind of a more professional outlook.
Right, everything above board.
Yes. On this
envelopes with cash.
That's right. In this in-home child care world, which at that time, most people were saying, you've hired a what? A nanny? And
Sure.
today that's very mainstream. And I share that because in the same time frame with two kids, a demanding corporate career, my husband doing the same thing, I started to have this awareness, learning really, I think, of what am I really good at? What do I like to do? What makes me really feel like my best talents are in play? And I started to think, and my husband was having the same thoughts, he's my co-founder by the way,
Sure.
Started to think that maybe going on our own would be a more fulfilling and hopefully more successful path.
So I'm curious about that because it seems like you guys were in a position of a kind of vulnerability, right? You have young kids.
Yes.
You're in a strong part in your career, but you're still building.
Right.
And so to me, just from a distance, that would seem like the last time you would say, you know what, let's go try something really risky that we have no experience doing. And like, let's just go for it, like little kids.
Yes, you're absolutely right. I really didn't feel like we were running from something though. I felt like we were running to something. And though to speak to that risk, that angst,
Yeah.
I'll describe a little bit how that played out. So we decided this idea of helping other families do what we muddled through, the nanny tax and payroll process, could be a successful niche business as the in-home care industry emerged. But here's how it went, talking about that risk. We launched a minimum viable product, which wasn't even a term in 1992. And we kept our jobs.
Okay.
And we were afraid that giving up a paycheck, the risk, the burgeoning careers, we had good careers,
Sure.
the financial responsibility with two babies, we now had a 1 and a 2-year-old, that we would just dabble on the side and see if maybe it might be worth the risk. And here's what happened. 2 years in, it started to grow legs, little legs. I wouldn't say that it was highly successful, but it started to churn revenue. It was about half of my salary in the corporate America. We weren't profitable yet.
Right.
And it started to grow with nominal, if almost no, marketing and sales efforts, just word of mouth. And then the last thing happened that pulled the trigger. It started to kill us. It was no longer a few moments in the evenings or on the weekends. And we either needed to shut it down because a business on the side was ruining the balance in our life,
Sure.
or we needed to go full time. So the reality is we didn't have this idea and say, I'm willing to take on the risk of jumping into entrepreneurship. We actually took a tiny baby step, spent 2 years dabbling, not giving up any of the comforts of our jobs. And then when it started to grow some legs, we decided that the risk was worth it for one of us.
Okay.
So I took the leap.
Sure. Yeah, I think that period of dabbling where you're first reaching out and trying things, it's very underrepresented in sort of the mythology of startups. You know,
Yes.
Very often you think, well, there's the whole guy with a garage, right? But then there's just this all-in, I mean, what's the name of the book? But
Yes.
all-in immediately.
Yes.
Right, and you don't even test things out. Because I would wonder sometimes, it worked out great for you and your husband, but I wonder if sometimes it's an itch and then you scratch it for a year and you realize either from a market perspective, maybe the market's not that big, or maybe it's too much work, or alternatively, maybe you don't like the startup life. Maybe the realities of building a business, and they're difficult, just you think, you know what, actually I kind of like having the regular secure job, or as secure as jobs are these days.
That's right, and you actually touched on something that watching the entrepreneurial landscape unfold over the past 20 years.
Right.
I really do feel that most, not all, but most entrepreneurs have a better chance of being successful if they in some way, maybe not exactly the way I did it, but if they in some way take the time with low risk and low expenses, keeping that capital play down, to test, to build the shell of a business plan, to really think thoughtfully about your budget and what kind of runway do you need, and then to think thoughtfully about funding, because everyone thinks that you need equity angel investment or VC to start a business, and there's lots of other ways. And then last, to have some time to figure out if this really is for you.
Right.
I think businesses have a higher probability of failing if you have an idea, you have the confidence you can do it, but you just leap. You quit your job, you don't have any funding yet, you're looking for funding, you've got your cart in front of your horse, you know, because you're out making decisions based on the fact that you already quit your job and you've already got a product, at least a shell of one, but you don't have any money or any strategy to bring to the marketplace. So I'm actually a believer in a slower play before the big leap.
Got it. It makes sense too, because the like we talked about the minimum viable product, you know, things change as you have the concept, and then as you develop it, suddenly realities and unexpected things happen, and then you shift things and you need different things.
Right.
I was curious, so a lot of time you talk about the landscape for small businesses, and I was amazed, this is just a statistic, but that something like 99% of businesses in the US are small businesses?
Yes.
That seems like a staggering number.
It is staggering, so I'll give you a little landscape or state of the union.
Sure.
So the Census Bureau does a study every 5 years called the Survey of Business Owners, the SBO. And that's the data that we all use for all of our research. And a business with less than 500 employees is classified as a small business. So there's a caveat there, because there's a big difference between a business with 10 employees and a business with 500 employees.
Sure.
But those under 500 comprise 99.7% of all businesses in America.
Okay, that's huge.
Yeah, so really the backbone of America is entrepreneurship in small businesses. And to put another stat to that, those small businesses, that under 500, they're generating approximately 70% of our revenue and between 65 to 70% of employment as well.
Well, that would be my other question is, you know, that 0.3% of businesses, do they, you know, employ half the country?
They employ, you know, over a third of the country.
A third of the country, right. Yeah. Which explains why when you drive through America, it's all Home Depot and McDonald's.
Yeah, exactly.
FedEx.
Exactly.
One after another.
There are 18,000 companies that are considered our largest companies. I mean, you know, what we would consider kind of like the Fortune 1000, although there's 18,000. You know, that represent, once you say, everything you see on social media, when you drive down the road, and the advertisements are those companies.
Got it. Yeah, it used to be, I mean, this is a strange aside, but I remember a stat about how little kids now recognize logos. They can identify by the age of 5. I have young children.
Wow.
And it's true, they'll know, you know, what the Coca-Cola logo is, what the Nike logo is, what the Netflix, I mean, they know Netflix better than they know Mother Goose. It's amazing how it just becomes part of the cultural landscape.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, a huge part of the book, of course, is that women entrepreneurs are underrepresented. There's not as many as there should be, and so and it's a very actionable book where it gives a lot of great advice on what you actually need to do. So I thought it might be good to start with what are the things holding women back from getting into entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and let me give you a little context, behind that. I have to share that as an entrepreneur for the past 25 years, I really have not had until recently this new mission to help women step into entrepreneurship and to build businesses of scale. I really was just heads down, as most entrepreneurs are, building a business, trying to be an industry leader, raising a family. And here's what happened, which is a lead up to the book and to answer your question about the barriers. As we began to scale, and talking about business size, we moved from a small to a mid-sized company, a little over 30 employees, about 10 million in revenue. So this is not large, but in the scope of American businesses, it's considered mid-size. And life got easier. There was more success. There was more, financial stability. I began to have fewer and fewer female cohorts. There are a lot of women who are starting small businesses and running small businesses. And as I came to the end of my journey, my company was acquired a few years ago, and I've had an exit, which has really been what's been the stimulus for the book. I started to research why I was feeling somewhat alone. I really felt like I shouldn't feel so alone. And talking about the stats, I started researching and I realized that, first of all, women in entrepreneurship has grown in terms of the number of businesses that have been started, which is great. It's something to celebrate. Women own 35% of all businesses in America as of 2016, which is real advancement in just women in the workforce and women in business. But a look under the hood started to explain why I felt so alone. So here's some stats.
Let's hear.
So women, we own 35% of all businesses in America. Less than 2% of our businesses have more than $1 million in revenue each year. We employ only 6% of the U.S. workforce, and we generate only 4% of all revenue from businesses in America. And I'll flip it around the other way, and this really isn't a conversation about men versus women, but it gives you some context. So businesses currently owned by men are 3.5 times more likely to cross the $1 million revenue mark than businesses owned by women. Thus, as we grew, I left those cohorts behind. So that takes us to the barriers. So that's a highly complex question, and we could spend several hours in a conversation on that. But to sum it up, there's I think 2 core pieces or buckets to that. One is that we are early in the evolution of women in education, in business, and women are 50% of all college graduates just in the last decade. Women hold 40% of management positions, but we are only about 17% of the C-suite, only 35% of business ownership. So there really is an evolution in progress, and in time, things will continue to improve. But then there's another side of it. We are not seeing the progress, particularly in women in the C-suite or women growing businesses of scale, as you would expect, given what's happening in education. So what are the barriers? And there's a long list, but I would say the beginning of the core barriers is a lack of financial skill and knowledge to be able to start a company effectively and then have the right working knowledge or background to get funding. We see funding as a major issue in media every day, and then to take it to the next scale.
So the financial knowledge, is that an issue of women just not studying economics in college as much or accounting? Because you mentioned in the book how empowering it is to just accept or say what you know and don't know about finance, and then just figure out what you need to know, and then to not sort of just say, oh, I'm going to bring in this CFO to run everything. I'm going to figure it out myself. So I wonder if it's an actual knowledge deficit or if it's just men bullshit more about money and just think they know what they're doing.
It's probably both.
Yeah.
Actually, it's funny you bring that up. I'll add a second barrier and then come back to the financial part. Is women in the studies that have been done, I'm really just quoting studies that have been done by some of our top universities, MIT and Harvard and Columbia, have found that generally, although women entrepreneurs have the exact same drive for entrepreneurship that men do and some of the same traits, a level below that, women have generally less hubris. We have generally less confidence that we can fake it till we make it. Right. And I think that gets in the way of a lot of progress. To bring it back to the finances, entrepreneurs in general, we're idea people. And although we like to roll up our sleeves and get things done, in general, I don't think entrepreneurs focus enough on the importance of the financials. Okay. It's something that is ugly and we all like to ignore, and it's critical to the success of our business. Now, to take it to the female side, right now in entrepreneurship, and as we're coming through the evolution, a significant number, majority of women that are coming into entrepreneurship, they're coming from fields that aren't STEM, and they're not financial. Okay. So they are coming from industries in marketing and sales, or the social side, of our industries. So those are their strengths. But you've got to add the strengths of, the financial and the technology and the pieces that are not your strengths. And you brought up a good point. You can say, I'm going to hire a bookkeeper, I'm going to hire an accountant, or finally grown to be a size in which I'm going to hire a CFO. You absolutely should be doing those things. Yeah. But that doesn't remove you from the responsibility of knowing and making the ultimate decision. Yeah. If there's a third barrier to throw in there, we've talked about confidence, we've talked about the importance of focusing on the financials, as I call it. I think the third thing that I would throw in there is, and it's the main reason I've written the book, is lack of role models. A lot of studies have come out, particularly focused on why we don't have as many women on corporate boards. And there was a study done by MIT, and they found that, to put it simply, that people like them, birds of a feather flock together. Sure. So people in general are 3 times more likely to start a business or to take on the risk to grow a business if they feel they have a role model that's nearby or relatable, or even that they can interact with. And there's nothing wrong with a woman having a male role model, but I think from a broader context, women want to see more women in the media, in the public, who have carved the path ahead of them. And it's one of the top 3 reasons that people in general, and women now specifically, aren't taking those next steps. So I think that's a third core barrier. And hopefully time will change that. Yeah. The more women grow scalable businesses, and pay it forward, like I'm doing, I think we will close that gap in role models.
I had a question about, inevitably this comes up, but how, there's the work-life balance question, right? And it's tedious, and anytime a woman is interviewed who's in finance or business, it's always, work-life balance. And then you interview a man, and it doesn't come up as a question. So, caveat is, I don't mean it in the way of, I would only ask a woman. I think it's an interesting question because it's always around and it's always brought up, and there is an expectation there that when it comes down to it, the default is the women are going to have to deal with the domestic side of things, even if they just have to outsource it to some way. And do you find that is changing at all with all the other changes going on culturally, with new millennial parents who are maybe going into it in a sort of a 50-50 manner around things like childcare and housework and stuff?
I do think it's changing, but I think it's changing too slowly. Yeah. I think our business culture and our societal cultures are not keeping up with the desires of American couples. Well, I'll say millennials because that's the age group, but American couples in general. And I say that because, well, and actually I'll share this. I'm not a huge fan of the word balance, and I'll just put that out there because, well, and the reason I say that is, I do think, particularly for women, and this is just our mindset, and yes, we do take the lead with child care and organizing that part of our family lives. But balance gives this connotation that you have to look like you are perfectly balanced. And if you think of a balance, if you physically think of one, you've got a set of stuff on one side, a set of stuff on the other, and in order to keep it in harmony, nothing can move and nothing can go too quickly, and you can't take things off and on quickly. Well, that's not life. Life is a series of peaks and valleys, so I call it integration, and I think that's a challenge for men and women. But to go to your point about are things changing, and I'll quote some more studies because I think they're really valuable. There was a study done just about a year and a half ago by two sociologists, Sarah Tabad and David Padula, and the study focused on millennial couples who are dual income and what their desires are out of family life and work. And the interesting thing that came out of the study is that the majority, I think it was close to 60%, of both men and women preferred equality across the board in life, at home, responsibilities for childcare, cooking, household duties, carpools, and in earning income. It was, the study showed it was a burden somewhat off of a man's shoulders to know that they're sharing that responsibility together. Here's the caveat. However, it didn't say the majority, but a significant number of couples are reverting back to traditional roles because as their careers progress, our business culture has not yet caught up with that desire. And I do think culture is changing. I mean, to be honest with you, we're watching entrepreneurs building tomorrow's big companies with more of a focus on the importance of culture and how that also tracks to the bottom line. It's not just nice and helpful. It's smart business. So I do think it's changing, but I think it's changing too slowly.
And then sort of a final question. And maybe you answered it, maybe the book is your answer to it, but what do you wish you'd known when you were first starting out in this long journey as an entrepreneur?
Well, you ask an entrepreneur this and you're probably going to get 100 different answers from 100 different people. For me, I have one fatal flaw that I can't seem to fix. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs have this flaw, so I'll throw this one out there, is even though being an entrepreneur is risky, and obviously you have to have an appetite for risk, and you have to be confident in being the captain of your own ship, and that you really can grow something of size and value. Every time I was at a crossroads, or a precipice of making a decision to take the next step, which was a good problem to have because it meant there was growth, there needed to be new strategic direction. I never took this step until I was in so much pain that I knew I couldn't go back, but I couldn't stay where I was. So I think my answer would be, if I could do it over again, I would try to have a little more self-awareness, a little more broad thinking, a little more confidence in taking that next big step before it was so painful that I didn't have a choice.
That is good advice. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been fun. Thank you.